I'm Marley, 36, female. Growing up wasn't the easiest journey for Cora and me. Our parents passed away when we were very young, and I had to step into the role of being a parent to my younger sister. It was a responsibility I took on with pride and determination. I had to be strong for her, and I never wanted Cora to feel like she was alone in this world. I remember the days when I was a waitress struggling to make ends meet while taking care of my sister. It was during that time I met Andreas. He was charming, kind, and we hit it off instantly. We exchanged numbers and started dating when I was 24, and everything felt perfect. Life seemed to be taking a turn for the better, and I felt like I could finally provide for my sister and give her a safe, stable home with the help of my boyfriend. But it didn't take long for the cracks in our relationship to start showing. You see, Cora knew about Andreas, and they would often hang out together. I watched as Cora playfully flirted with him, and my heart ached, but I tried to ignore it. I couldn't bear the thought of making a fuss. Cora was used to getting herself into trouble, with arrests for petty crimes like being drunk in public and public indecency. Despite the warning signs, I couldn't help but condone her actions. I still saw her as the little girl I needed to protect, the sister who depended on me. Andreas would often tell me that I was too lenient, too forgiving of her antics. He said I needed to let Cora grow up and stand on her own 2 feet, but I couldn't bring myself to do it. Time flew by, and when I turned 30, Andreas finally popped the question. We had a lovely wedding, and for a while it seemed like everything was falling into place. We were excited to start our married life together, and it was time for me to move in with Andreas. However, the idea of me moving in with him didn't sit well with Cora. She was hesitant and didn't want to be alone, especially because she couldn't hold down a job or maintain a stable life on her own. It put me in a difficult position, as I still felt that responsibility to take care of her. My heart ached for my sister, and I wanted to make sure she was okay. But Andreas had a different perspective. He firmly believed that we needed to focus on our marriage without any distractions or added responsibilities. He urged me to be more assertive and put my foot down, setting boundaries and prioritizing our relationship. He insisted that he didn't fully understand the complexities of our past, but stressed that we needed to put our marriage first. I struggled with the decision, torn between my loyalty to my sister and my love for Andreas. But as our arguments continued, I realized I had to choose. In the end, Andreas gave up on the matter, seeing how torn I was. He understood that I couldn't bear the thought of leaving my sister in a difficult situation, and he decided to allow Cora to move in with us. It was a relief in many ways, but the decision also stirred a sense of unease. I had chosen my sister's well-being over my marriage, and I knew it had consequences. I wasn't sure if Andreas was fully satisfied with the resolution, and I couldn't shake the feeling that I had let him down. It was a heavy burden to carry, and I feared it might take a toll on our relationship. 2 years had passed since Cora moved in with Andreas and me, and the harmony in our home had deteriorated drastically. Cora's behavior had become a constant source of tension. She was often rowdy, sneaking men into the house at night, causing disturbances in the neighborhood, and just generally being disruptive. Her disregard for our home and the people living in it was evident through her messy habits, leaving her dishes strewn about and refusing to take out the trash. Andreas was at the end of his patience. He'd often tell me to address my sister's reckless behavior, and I couldn't help but feel a sense of frustration building inside me as well. Every time I confronted Cora, she'd apologize for her actions and promise to be a better housemate. For a few weeks, it seemed like she genuinely tried to change, but it never lasted. she'd quickly revert to her toxic ways, leaving Andreas even more infuriated. One evening, the situation came to a head. We were all at each other's throats, and our home had turned into a battleground. We were all angry and yelling. It was a huge, painful fight, and I found myself torn between my husband and my sister. Cora, we've reached a breaking point here. Your behavior is causing too much chaos in this house. Andreas, please understand that Cora has had a tough life and she's trying her best. You wouldn't understand. I get it, Arlie, but we're all adults here and she needs to start acting like one. I can't keep living in this environment. Please, Andreas, don't kick me out. I promise I can do better. I'll change. Just give me a chance. Please. Cora, it's been 2 years and we've tried this before. Your promises haven't held up. I need peace in my home, Arlie. And we can't have that with Cora's actions. Please don't make this harder than it needs to be. Andreas, I understand, but she's my sister. She's been through a lot and I can't just throw her out. We need to give her a little more time to adjust. Arlie, I'm so sorry for everything. Please don't let me go. I promise I'll change. Please, just one more chance. I promise I'll make things right this time. After a lengthy and emotionally charged discussion, I proposed a compromise. I suggested that Cora could remain in the house if she managed to secure and maintain a stable job and started contributing to the household expenses. Andreas seemed to favor the idea, and I believed it was mainly because he assumed it wouldn't last. In his mind, this would be the final straw, giving him a legitimate reason to evict Cora without further arguments. I promise, Arlie, I'll do whatever it takes to make this work. Thank you both for giving me another chance. We believe in you, Cora, and we want this to work. All right, we'll give this a shot, but you better be ready to work hard and prove yourself. Thank you, Andreas, and I think it'll be a great idea if you take Cora on at the shop. It's a way for you two to bond and get to know each other. We all need to work on our relationships. I don't like that idea, but I'll give it a try. But, Cora, you better be prepared to work hard. Thank you both so much. I promise I won't let you down. We can make this work. For the next month, life seemed to be on an upswing. Cora was learning the ropes at the mechanic shop, being less reckless and helping out more around the house. Andreas, though initially skeptical, was becoming more patient. And the tension between him and Cora was gradually easing. It was a time of relative peace for all of us. As a couple of months passed, I couldn't shake the uncomfortable feeling that something was amiss. It became increasingly apparent that Cora and Andreas were growing closer, much more than I had initially anticipated. At first, I brushed off my discomfort, reminding myself that it was my own desire for them to get along that had set this course of events in motion. However, I couldn't help but notice that their interactions seemed to take on a different tone. It became evident to me that Andreas was not just being friendly with Cora. He was reciprocating her flirtatious behavior. One night, I decided to address this with my husband, hoping for reassurance. I expressed my feelings, explaining that his behavior was making me uncomfortable. In response, Andreas argued that I was being hypocritical, questioning why I had never told Cora to stop when I had encouraged their newfound friendship. This accusation left me second-guessing myself, wondering if I was indeed overreacting. The next day, I gathered the courage to talk to Cora about her flirtatious behavior. I explained how her actions made me feel, but instead of understanding my concerns, she dismissed them. Cora insisted that I was overreacting and needed to be grateful that she and Andreas were now friends, instead of enemies. It was as if my concerns were invalid and I was being unreasonable. Cora, I've noticed that you and Andreas have been getting quite close lately. I just want to express how it's making me uncomfortable. Arlie, you're totally overreacting. It's not a big deal. We become friends, and that's a good thing. But it's not just friendship, Cora. I've seen the flirting and the playful interactions. It's making me feel like I'm being pushed aside. Come on, sis. You know I've always been a bit flirtatious, and Andreas is just being friendly back. Besides, it's better for us all to get along. I know you're a flirt, Cora, but this feels different. It's creating tension between Andreas and me. I need you to tone it down. You're blowing this out of proportion, Arlie. You've always taken care of me, and now you're happily married. It's time for me to have some fun and not be a burden on you. Cora, it's not about being a burden. It's about boundaries. I just need you to respect the boundaries in our relationship. It's causing issues between Andreas and me. Despite my growing discomfort, I chose to drop the issue, even though I couldn't help but harbor a budding resentment towards both Andreas and Cora. The situation was further complicated by the fact that Cora was now working for Andreas, and I no longer liked the idea of her being in such close proximity to him. I suggested that Cora find a new job, but she refused, claiming that she enjoyed her current position. Our discussions on this matter often ended in heated arguments, and when I turned to Andreas for support, he questioned why I was surprised by Cora's behavior when it had been her nature all along. I felt like I was being isolated and misunderstood in my own home. I was at work when I got the call. My neighbor sounded panicked, telling me there was a fire in our house and that she had already called the fire department. But she was afraid that Andreas and Cora might still be inside. The world seemed to spin and my heart raced with fear. I rushed back home, leaving my bewildered customers behind. When I arrived, I saw smoke coming from our charred home and firefighters fighting the flames. I couldn't see Andreas or Cora anywhere. My mind raced with fear. I approached our neighbor, asking with dread in my voice, "Did they get out? Where are they?" I couldn't bear the thought of them being trapped inside. The firefighters kept me away from the burning house, reminding me that it was too dangerous. All I could do was wait, feeling helpless. As the firefighters battled the flames, each passing minute felt like an eternity. I prayed for Andreas and Cora's safety, berating myself for not being there when they needed me the most. I wished I had done more to mend the growing rift between us. Finally, I saw Andreas, and he was being pulled out on a stretcher and covered in severe burns. I almost couldn't recognize him. I started screaming and wailing, asking how any of this could be possible. I asked the other firefighters about my sister, and they looked at me confused, saying that it was only one person they found in the fire, and that there were no remains or anything suggesting someone was burnt up in the fire. I remained by Andreas's side, the hospital room filled with the sterile scent of disinfectant and the beeping of machines, a constant reminder of his fragile state. Hours passed, feeling like an eternity, my heart aching with worry. The questions kept swirling in my mind, and I couldn't shake the fear that something terrible had happened to Cora. Finally, Andreas began to stir, his eyes fluttering open. He was disoriented, his face contorted with pain as he tried to make sense of his surroundings. When he saw me, relief washed over his eyes. "Andreas! Oh, thank God you're awake! You're in the hospital! You had a fire at the house, but you're going to be okay." He tried to speak, but his throat was dry and raspy. I handed him a cup of water, and he sipped it carefully, grimacing with each swallow. Then he looked at me with a furrowed brow, as if he was searching his foggy memory. "Where's Cora? I've been trying to call her, but she's not answering. Do you remember anything? How did the fire start?" Andreas's face darkened with confusion. I don't know. The last thing I remember is spending the day with her and then falling asleep." The fear gripped my heart even tighter. If he had last seen Cora and now he was in the hospital, it didn't bode well. I felt a rush of desperation and helplessness, not knowing where my sister could be. Andreas's eyelids drooped and he drifted back to sleep, his frail body in the grip of exhaustion and pain. I stayed with him for a while longer, reassuring myself that he was on the path to recovery. As he slept, I made a decision. I had to file a missing persons report for Cora. It was terrifying to imagine what might have happened to her, especially given her recent behavior. But I had to find her, and I wouldn't rest until I did. She was family, and I couldn't bear the thought of losing her too. As the weeks passed and there was still no sign of Cora, the weight of uncertainty pressed heavily on my shoulders. Andreas was finally being discharged from the hospital, but our lives took a devastating turn. The doctors delivered the grim news that his legs had suffered severe burns, and it was highly likely that he would never walk again. The future we had imagined seemed to crumble before us. Andreas was devastated, and I knew that this would be a challenge we'd face together. Once we arrived in our new apartment that we had to rent out, I was determined to provide the best care for my husband. It was an overwhelming task, juggling his recovery and the persistent absence of my sister, but I would do whatever it took to support Andreas through this trying period. "You have to take care of me now. I'm so grateful for you and everything that you do. I love you, Arlie." Andreas, with his newfound disability, quickly adapted to a role that demanded my constant attention. He grew dependent on me, both physically and emotionally, and though I loved him and wanted to help him heal, the weight of it all began to wear me down. He kept on mentioning that I would need to care for him from now on, which only added to the mounting pressure I was under. I was dealing with my own depression, triggered by Cora's disappearance, the state of our house, and the uncertainty of it all, but I couldn't afford to wallow in my sadness. There were too many responsibilities resting on my shoulders. Then there was the matter of our insurance claim. The insurance company requested all video footage from our home security cameras to determine the fire's cause. I was too overwhelmed to handle the process, so I handed over the salvaged CCTV footage, hoping it would speed up the insurance claim. A few days later, I received a call from the insurance company, and their words hit me like a ton of bricks. They informed me that they wouldn't grant the insurance because there was evidence of recklessness leading to the fire's origin. It was a shock to my already shattered world. I had to gather the strength to watch the footage myself to see what had gone wrong, what reckless behavior had led to the fire, and the truth of what had happened that fateful night. Watching the video was a tortuous experience. As the footage played, I saw Andreas and Cora, of all people, cooking together in our kitchen. It was painful to witness, but I forced myself to keep watching. My heart sank as they grew closer, and before long they were entangled in a passionate embrace. My eyes welled up with tears as I struggled to process the betrayal before me. The scene unfolded further, growing more explicit, and they eventually made their way to our bed. I felt physically sick, but I had to see how deep this betrayal went. I watched with a heavy heart, knowing that I was about to uncover the depths of their deceit. After their intimate encounter, I witnessed Cora getting some coffee for Andreas, but my stomach turned when I saw her crushing his sleeping pills into it. My hands were trembling as I watched him consume the concoction, which would send him into a deep sleep. Cora then went through Andreas's pockets, stealing from him before packing her belongings and leaving the house. As if this wasn't enough, I saw the stove they had used for their cooking session remained on, and eventually it ignited and caused the fire that nearly destroyed our home. That's why the insurance company rejected our claim, saying that it was due to negligence, and I could see why they felt that way. My blood was boiling with anger and I needed answers. After composing myself, I approached Andreas with the video evidence. I confronted him, desperate for an explanation. He stuttered and tried to avoid facing the truth, but I refused to let him escape the gravity of his actions. Forced to watch the damning footage with him, Andreas's discomfort grew as the video played out the ultimate betrayal. When it reached the part where Cora had drugged his coffee with sleeping pills, he had the audacity to be offended. It was infuriating. The whole time he remained oblivious to the magnitude of his own betrayal. When the video concluded with Andreas being responsible for leaving the stove on and causing the fire, he broke down in tears, begging for my forgiveness. At that moment, all the pain, anger, and betrayal I had felt reached a boiling point. I spat on him, my voice trembling with rage, and said that I was glad Cora had stolen from him. I had no sympathy left for the man who had betrayed me and allowed my sister to take advantage of him. I also told him that I was glad that he was paralyzed, and I told him that he had better hire someone to take care of him because I was going to divorce him and leave him alone. Andreas kept on begging and whining, so I got up, grabbed the kettle, and poured boiling hot water on his crotch. He obviously was in agony, but I kept pouring, saying that if the rest of his body was burnt, it was only fair that the thing that caused this mess was burnt too. When I was done, I left him there crying, and I didn't feel bad one bit, because now my rage was turned towards my sister. I couldn't believe she was playing all of us, pretending to have turned a new leaf when I guess this was her plan all along. I still can't believe she just left me like that. But it's okay because I'm going to find her, and when I do, I'll make sure she never thinks to cross me again. Cora, if you're seeing this, I'm coming for you. I've played Mr. Nice Guy for way too long. It's time I enter my villain era and teach some people some well-deserved lessons.